Hi everybody, welcome to GTCoding. In today's video, we will build a simple Next.js application demonstrating authentication using the NextAuth library. But before we jump into the code, let's take a moment to understand what authentication is all about. So authentication is basically the process of verifying the identity of a user or a device attempting to access a system or an application. It ensures that only the authorized individuals can access certain resources, protecting sensitive information and maintaining the security of your application. Today we will be using the latest version of Next.js with the latest app directory to create this application. We will authenticate the user using GitHub with the NextAuth library, and we will style our app using Tailwind CSS. So let's get started. Right, here's the demo of our application, and this is a simple application with just one page. And here we can see we have this nav bar, and then we have this login button. We have the sign in button over here as well, so both of these does the same thing. So let's click on the sign in with GitHub button. Now here we have the screen to authorize our application. So if you haven't logged into GitHub, then you will have a screen to log into your GitHub account. And once you log in, you will find this screen right here. And then here you have to click on authorize. So let's click on authorize. And once we are authorized, we can see that we have the name displayed over here from the GitHub profile, and we also have the profile image displayed over here. And then we have this sign out button, and let's click on sign out. And now we can see that we are signed out of our application. And now if we click on sign in once again, we can see that we are logged back in, and this time we don't have to authorize. So this is basically how our app is gonna work. So let's start by writing the code. Right here I just created this folder called auth app, and I just opened it with VS Code. Now let's open the terminal. So you can just click on view and click on terminal. Now first of all, let's write the command to create a new Next app. Now before doing all of this, you have to make sure that you have Node.js installed on your system. So if you haven't installed that, you can just go to the official website and follow the instructions. And once you're done that, you can just type npx create next app at latest, and let's press enter. And the first question is, what is the name of your project? So I'll just type dot because we want to install this in the same directory. So let's press enter. And for TypeScript, I will select no, and yes for ESLint, and yes for Tailwind CSS, and no for source directory, and yes for app router. And I'll just select the default import alias. Right, our Next.js app has been created. So let's type npm run dev to open it. And let's open this URL. And here we have the Next.js application, and this is the default page that comes by Next.js. So now let's go ahead and create the UI. So let's go ahead and remove all these content from here. So let's go inside the app folder, and let's go to global CSS, and I'll just delete all these lines of code over here. So I'll just delete all the CSS. And now let's go to page.js, and let's delete all of this from here. And here I'll just return an h1, and let's type welcome. And now if we go back to our app, here we can see that welcome is displayed. And we can just delete this import of image from here. Right, now let's go to the root of our application, and let's create a folder, and I'll just name it components. And in this we'll create all the components needed for our design. So first of all, we'll create a component called header. So let's create a new file, and I'll just name it header.jsx. And here let's type export default function, and I'll just call it header. And here we'll just return an h1 for now. So let's type h1, and let's type header over here. And let's go back to our page.js file. I'll just rename this to page.jsx. And here I'll just import header. So we can just type header, and I'll just click on this. And now we can see that header is imported over here. So now if you go back to our application, we can see that it says header. So this component is being imported into our main page. Now before writing the code for header, let's go ahead and add some styles to this layout file. So this file right here will affect all the other pages in this directory. So here if I just type h1 hello, and now if you go back, here we can see that hello is displayed over here. Now this code will be added to all the pages in our app. So here we will add the nav bar. So for that, let's go back to the components folder and let's create a new file and let's call it navbar.jsx. And here let's tap export default function navbar, and let's return an h1 for now, navbar. And let's go back to the layout.js file and let's add the navbar over here. So I'll just type navbar and I'll just import it over here. And let's add some styles over here as well. So let's go ahead and add all of this inside a div. And for the div, let's give some classes. So let's tap class name. And we will use Tailwind CSS for the styling. So let's tap max W for max width. And let's set it to 5XL. And let's tap MX Auto to bring it to the center. And let's set the padding for the left and right to 8. And now we can see that it is styled. Right now let's write the code for the nav bar. So for the nav bar, we need to have this logo on the left side and this sign in button. So let's go to this nav bar component. And I'll just delete this h1 from here and I'll just create a nav element. And in here we need to first of all have the logo. So let's use the link in Next.js. So you can just tap link and import it over here. So import link from next link. And in this link you can add href. And for the link I'll just type /. And here let's type GTCoding. And then we need to have this sign in button. But we also need to have a profile icon over here. So for that, let's go ahead and create a new component. So let's create a new file called profileicon.jsx. And let's tap export default function profile icon. And let's return a button. And in that, let's type sign in. Now when we have signed in, we'll also add the profile icon and also the sign out button. But for now, let's keep this sign in button right here. And let's go back to our navbar.jsx file. And here, let's type profile icon. And here it has automatically imported it. Now let's go ahead and add some styles to this nav. So let's tap class name and let's tap flex and let's set it to items center. And we will type justify between. So it will have a space between the elements. So now we can see that the logo is on the left side and this sign in button on the right side. I'll just decrease this width. Right now let's go ahead and set the position to fixed. And we'll set the left to 0 and the right to 0. And we'll set a padding X of 8. And let's set a height of, let's try 14. Now if you hover over this, you will find the actual CSS that is being written. So for that, I have installed an extension for Tailwind CSS. So you can install this Tailwind CSS extension. Right now, let's go ahead and add a background color and let's set it to BG blue 500. And let's just set the text color to white. And now for the logo, let's go ahead and make it bold. So let's tap class name and let's tap font bold. Right, that's basically it with the nav bar. Now the other content of our website is below this nav bar. So let's go back to the layout file and here let's add a division, and we will add the children inside this division. And for this division, let's type class name and let's set a padding top of let's try 16, and I think that looks alright. Right now let's go back to our page and here we have this header. So let's open this and let's write the code for the header. Now here we need to have this heading and this button. So let's go ahead and create a div, and here let's create an h1 and let's type login to get started, and let's create a button. And now for the button, we'll create a component. So let's go back to the components folder and let's create a new file, and I'll just name it login button.jsx. And here let's tap export default function login button and return. And here I'll just create a button tag, and in this button I'll just type sign in with GitHub. Right now let's add this to our header. So here after this h1, let's type login button. Right now let's go back to the login button and let's add some styles over here. So let's type class name and let's set the margin top to 4 and let's set the background color to slate 800 and let's set the text color to white and let's set the padding left and right to 6 and padding top and bottom to 3 and we'll also add rounded corners and let's set it to large. Right now let's go back to the header and here for the div let's add some class. So let's type flex and flex call and items center and justify center and let's set the height to full screen and since we have this navbar at the top, we'll also type -mt for negative margin of top and let's set it to 16. And with that we have completed designing most of the UI of our application. Now let's start with the NextAuth library. So let's open the terminal and let's just close this and let's type npm I NextAuth and let's press enter. And the NextAuth library has been installed. So let's type npm run dev to start the server. Alright, once you install NextAuth, the first thing you need to do is go into the app folder and create a new folder called API. And in that you have to create a new folder called auth. And in that you need to create a new folder called square brackets. And in that you have to type ... NextAuth. And in this folder you need to create a new file called route.js. And here we need to write the code for NextAuth. So first of all you have to import NextAuth from NextAuth/next and then we need to import the provider. So we'll be using GitHub provider, so I'll just type import GitHub provider from NextAuth/providers/GitHub. And now you need to create a handler. So let's type const handler and here you have to type NextAuth and here we need to pass some details. So first of all you have to type providers and in this we need to add all the providers. So we just have GitHub provider, so I'll just add that over here. So let's create an array and in that we need to type GitHub provider. Here we need to add the GitHub client ID and the GitHub client secret. So we need to add it inside this object. So we need to type client ID and here we need to add the client ID and then we need to type client secret and here we need to add the client secret and then lastly we need to export this handler. So let's type export and we need to export it as get and post. So here we need to type handler as get and handler as post. So this is the new way of creating the route.js file in Next.js for the NextAuth library. Right now let's go ahead and get this client ID and this client secret. So for that you have to go to GitHub settings and developer settings. So you can just go to this link right here, github.com/settings/developers. And here you have to go to OAuth applications and you have to create a new OAuth application. So let's click on new OAuth application and here you have to name the application. So I'll just type test application and then we need to add the homepage URL. So let's copy this link from here and let's paste it over here and here also let's paste the same link and let's click on register. And here we can see we have the client ID. So let's copy this and let's go back to our VS Code and now we need to create a file called .env to store these values because these are secret values. So let's go over here to the root of our application and let's create a new file called .env and here let's create a variable called GitHub client ID equals and let's paste it over here. And then we need to get the GitHub client secret. So let's type GitHub client secret equals and let's go back and let's click on generate a new client secret and let's copy this secret from here and let's go back and paste it over here. Right, once you've done that you can go back to the route.js file and here you can add these two variables. So you can access them by typing process.env and this name. So I'll just copy this name from here and let's paste it over here. And then we need to type process.env and then we have this name right here. So let's copy this and let's paste it over here. Now for NextAuth, you also need to add some variables over here. So let's type NextAuth secret, and here you need to add some secret text. So I'll just type secret text for NextAuth, and then we need to type NextAuth URL, and we need to set it to the URL of our application. So let's go back over here and let's copy this and let's paste it over here. Right now let's save this, and it is recommended to restart the server after making changes to the env file. So let's open the terminal and let's press Ctrl C to stop the server, and let's tap npm run dev. And now the server has restarted. So let's go back to our app. Right now the next thing we need to do is we need to wrap the whole app inside a provider. So if you go to the layout.jsx file, here we can see that this is the app, and if we add the provider over here, then it will wrap the whole app. So I'll just create a new file over here called provider, and I'll just wrap it around this app. So inside the app folder, let's create a new file and let's call it provider.js. Now here we need to import session provider from NextAuth. So let's tap import session provider from NextAuth React, and here let's tap export const, and I'll just call it NextAuth provider, and here we need to type children, and we need to add the children inside the session provider. So here let's type return and session provider, and here let's add the children. Now when we use session provider, we need to change this into a client component. So for that you have to go over here to the top, and here you have to type use client. Right now let's go back to the layout file, and we need to wrap the whole app with this NextAuth provider. So here let's go to the layout.js file, and here inside the body let's type NextAuth provider, and it is automatically imported over here, and we need to close it outside our app. So let's cut this ending tag from here and let's paste it over here. Right now that we have done this, let's go back to the nav bar, and here in this nav bar we have this sign in button, and it is inside the profile icon. So let's open that, and here we have the sign in button. Now here we need to add the sign in functionality from NextAuth. So for that let's go back over here and let's import sign in from NextAuth React. Right now let's go ahead and add an on click for this button, but before that we need to change this into a client component. So here let's type use client, and here let's type on click, and let's create an arrow function and let's type sign in, and here let's add the provider, which is GitHub. And now let's go to the app and let's click on sign in, and here we can see that we are taken to the authorization screen of GitHub. So the sign in is working alright. Now once we have signed in, we need to display the sign out button over here. So let's go back to our app and let's sign in. Let's click on authorize, and now we are signed in. So let's go back to our code, and here we need to import use session from NextAuth React, and here we can get the data from the session. So let's type const, and I'll just destructure the data, and we get something called data, and I'll just rename it to session, and we'll also get status of the authentication from use session. Right now here let's add an if condition, and let's type status, and let's see whether it is equal to authenticated, and if the status is authenticated, then we can just return the sign out button. So I'll just create a div over here, and here let's create a button, and let's type sign out, and now we can see that it says sign out, and let's also add the sign out functionality. So we can import that from NextAuth React. So here let's type sign out, and here let's type on click, and here let's type sign out. Right now let's see whether the sign out button is working. So let's click on sign out, and now we can see that it says sign in. So the sign out button is working, and let's click on sign in once again, and we can see that we have signed in back again, and here we have the sign out button. Let's also display the profile image over here. So for that, let's go ahead and create an image. Now in Next.js you have image, so you can just import image from next image, and let's go ahead and add the source of the image, and we're going to get the source from session, and in the session we will have user, and in user we will have image. So let's type session user image, and for the image we also need to have a width. So let's set the width to 40 pixels, and let's set the height to 40 pixels as well, and let's add a class name, and let's set it to rounded full, and let's save this. And now we can see we have this error. That's because this is an external website, so we need to add this to our next config so that we can receive images from this website. So let's copy this URL from here, and let's go to the next config file, which is this file right here. And here in next config you have to type images, and here you have to type domains, and let's add the image inside an array. Right now let's refresh this page, and now we can see that the profile image is displayed over here. Let's add some styling. So here for the div, let's type class name, and let's type flex, and let's set the gap to 5, and that looks alright. Now let's add the sign in functionality for this button as well. So let's sign out, and this sign in button is I think inside the header. So here we have this login button, so let's go into the login button, and here let's add an on click. But before that, let's go ahead and change this into a client component, and let's also import sign in. So let's type sign in from NextAuth React, and here let's type on click sign in GitHub, and let's click on this sign in button, and we can see that it is working alright. Now when we have signed in, we need to display different data over here. So this data is coming from the header.jsx file. So here we have this heading and this login button. So here also we will add an if condition. So for that we need to import use session from NextAuth, and before that we need to change this into a client component. So let's type use client, and here let's import use session from NextAuth React, and here let's type const, and let's destructure the data, and I'll just call it session. And we also need to get the status, and we'll get it from use session. And here let's add an if condition, and let's type status, and let's see whether it is equal to authenticated. And if it is authenticated, you have to return something else. So here let's type return, and let's copy this from here, and let's paste it over here. We need to change this to welcome, and we need to change this to the name. So let's create a span for that, and here let's type session, which we are getting from here, dot user dot name, and here we have the name. Let's also add some styling to this. So let's type class name, font bold, and text to Excel. Right, so that's basically it with the header, and with that we have completed creating this app. So we can sign out, and we have this screen right here, and if I click on sign in, we are authenticated with GitHub, and we have the details displayed over here. So that's basically how you can use authentication in your Next.js app using the NextAuth library. Right, so that's basically it for this video. I will leave the link of the source code in the description of this video. And if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments below. And if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.